Oh.
Yeah, so thank you. And I'm so
Hi
happy
guys, can
about
you
it.
hear me? Can you give
Yes,
me a sign if you can hear me?
perfect.
Amazing. Okay, because
Yeah. Now we can't hear you. Say it again.
hello?
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
Okay. So I hope we hold on with the connection. Um, Thank you so much for the invitation, Ute and Bettina and Barbara, the whole team. I'm really grateful for being here. And actually, when I first heard about this group, I was very excited because I felt I was the loner kind of here in Portugal studying this thing, not having any references. And then gradually, I found more and more researchers and people that are genuinely interested in life design, which makes me feel like I'm belonging to a group. So thank you so much, and yeah, let's start. So I will just set up the screen. So can I just start sharing? Yeah, I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Okay. Now, can you just tell me you can see the screen? Can you wave your hands? Yes, amazing.
We see your screen, we see Zoom.
Nice. So I'm moving to the presentation.
Yes, that's perfect.
Um,
Now we're in.
okay, perfect. So let's get in. So I hope I'm not gonna sort of bore you with a lot of science and a lot of findings from our ongoing research.
Just a second, Radek. Sorry, this is Sam, also from Portugal.
Ah,
Uh, I believe that just a couple, correct me if I'm wrong, just a couple minutes ago, the floor was passed to Uta, and then she was speaking halfway.
It's fine, it's fine. Let's just start. I'm
Okay.
totally flexible.
Okay,
Fine.
sorry.
So it's great. So Radek, say some words about yourself, please, and then just begin.
okay.
Yeah, great.
So Ute, you'll be my moderator. At any point you stop me and just
You can do it very well. So I'm your
okay. So
co-moderator.
thank you. So so my name is Radek. I'm originally from the Czech Republic. However, I've spent many years abroad. My background is in psychology. I studied at the University of Sussex in UK for both my bachelor and master's, and then life somehow brought me gradually to Lisbon. So right now I'm in Portugal, and I'm actually right now calling you from presenting from University of Nova School of Business Economics here in Lisbon. And so Samantha, Professor Samantha Sim, is my advisor at Nova. So I also invited her to ask if she would be able to join us. And there's also Amelia in the team somewhere. So we are a team of three from Nova SBE who are interested in life design and currently conducting research into this approach. So again, very happy to be part of this and to know that you are also out there somewhere in Germany and other countries studying this approach. So that's about it. Uta, is there anything else I should do before I go into the details? Okay. So the title of this talk, of this presentation, is to design or not to design. And I think it's a nice name to kind of frame the question whether it makes sense to engage with life designing. And the subtitle kind of encapsulates it. We try to assess the empirical efficacy and evidence behind career and life design, or CLD as we refer to it, to make it simpler in our language here at Nova. Basically, what do we know about life design? Because now there's a lot of talk about this. Some people are, applying it. Some people are marketing it. But from scientific standpoint, it's still rather a new field. So that's the kind of the first paper I would love to present you today. Some of the preliminary findings from my first paper, and then I would love to have your feedback. I would also love to gather some ideas or questions from you, any insights you may have, actually. So my intention is also to not only share what I'm sort of up to with my PhD right now that I'm doing, my PhD research, but also sort of have some kind of feedback from you. What do you think about this? So let's get into this. So I'm going to run through the beginnings because they are quite general, and we go more into specifics of my first paper. So yes, keep going. So this is just the context, but I'm aware we are all kind of from the field, so we are aware of what's happening. Put in a nutshell, the world of work is changing and has been changing dramatically. And so there is a lot of change, a lot of challenges associated with the change for current and future generations. And so we are trying to see if there are approaches out there that could help people transition more effectively. And so this topic of career and life transition is essentially what also my research is in here at NOVA. So life design, I'm sure many of you are aware, originally came from the career counseling, and the prominent figure is Professor Savickas from Kent University. But in the recent years, it became applied also to other contexts. And you mentioned Stanford life design and how they have started to approach that from a more practical standpoint, and also in a more group-based settings, which was not the convention before. So this is the format that I'm also, and we are very interested in here at NOVA, particularly. Group-based, applied, collaborative life design with various groups of stakeholders. So using design thinking as a one element in the process. And so my first paper, which I'm gonna present you today, is a systematic literature review of career and life design, which has that is available out there. So pretty much what I set out to do was to assess the efficacy of life design interventions, the empirical interventions, to really understand whether life design actually works, essentially. What evidence is there if it works? And opening up and paving further pathways for future research for my subsequent 2 papers. So this is the overall frame. This is the question. What empirical evidence do we have? I decided to use the PRISMA model by Libertati and also Snyder, who proposed it as a one viable way to conduct systematic literature reviews. And at the moment, I'm in the final phases of the write-up, finalizing the discussion and conclusion sections. Now, some of the ideas I have for publishing this, ideally, and again, any feedback is welcome also from you. I know some of you are also doing research and published papers on life designing. One of the main outlets is Journal of Vocational Behavior, but I'm aware there are other ones. So maybe at the end, I would welcome any feedback on that front. So moving forwards. So one of the first things that I think deserves to be highlighted is that to this date, there has been no comprehensive systematic literature review on the topic of career and life design. And when I first saw it surprised me a little bit because basically I thought it'd be super helpful to have something like that to have an idea what we know about life design, because we talk about it now a lot in this research group and in the world of business now increasingly, and career development. Life design is growing, as we will see shortly, but there's been not much actually done to integrate what we know. So I figured, well, this could be a nice research gap to contribute to through my PhD, and so that's the idea. So what I did was I drew on 2 databases, Scopus and Web of Science, and through the entries, ended up with over almost 3,500 directly related career and life design results. Then systematized and put together application of inclusion criteria, which led to a further funnel of obviously cutting down to much smaller number, but still nearly 400 CLD-based papers. And eventually out of these, we ended up with the 86 papers that were considered for the final synthesis. Now, this is the more detail about how this was conducted. So just to give you an idea, essentially every stage following the prescription by Libertati and systematic literature review consisted of clearly defined steps, essentially excluding at each stage papers that were not related to life design after examination, and eventually excluding also studies that were conceptual nature, which there were many, and eventually ending up with only the empirical empirical-based interventions. And by this, I mean papers that were using either quantitative, mixed methods, or qualitative designs that were clearly based on live design, explicitly stated live design. So anything else that was kind of unclear or was a bit hazy, or they, you know, kind of like, it didn't fit really the description by Savickas and didn't have the elements and ingredients that live design typically has, those papers were excluded. So we ended up just with pure live design papers based on interventions. And that number was 86 papers. So that's basically since the beginning of research in live design, this is what we ended up. So I'm now going to go into detail of this and just zooming in really into nitty gritty. And so Ute, if I get caught up in too much detail, please feel free to interrupt me, okay? Because I'm obviously in a research mode right now, so may get a bit caught up.
That's fine, that's fine. And also the other ones can interrupt, yeah? Or also if you have questions.
Yeah, please. Although Q&A maybe at the end would be the best in any detailed questions. So I'm just going to go by it one by one, some of the preliminary findings that I have made in this systematic literature review. And the first one is that live design is fairly young, but growing field in some way. Now, young field because the first paper was published in 2009, so that makes it about 14 years old. It's like a 14-year-old baby for now, live design, as an empirical intervention that's been studied more rigorously. And as you can see on the graph, the number of studies have been fluctuating. So there's not a steady growth, but there's been an interesting trend, particularly around certain years like 2016, 2020, 2022. There's been a significant growth of interest in these studies and empirical application of live design. And I'm expanding on this in my discussion further, which is my intention. But essentially, the years of 2016 was the year where Savickas, posted one of his seminal papers that sparked the interest in live design, in which he called for more interventions, and I think that may be correlated with the growing interest there, partially. Same around 2020, there was another year when another major paper was published, again by Savickas and colleagues, I believe. And then we have 2021, 2022, COVID period. So, a lot of interest in novel interventions that could be delivered online during pandemic, helping people to transition in their careers. I think those are some of the main points that I think that I understand from the literature and from the context. So moving on, publication outlets. So from the research, it became very clear from the findings that majority of the studies, they were published either in Q1 or Q2 journals, whereas that basically makes it that almost most of the studies were in upper journals. However, the Q1, the top ranked journals really, or if we would use the other types of rankings for that matter, really are not still, the papers are not making it to the highest quality journals. That's the key takeaway here. For some reason, the live design is still very kind of very few papers who made it to the very, very top quality journals for now. The main one is the Journal of Vocational Behavior. That was the primary outlet for live design studies. That is a great journal, very highly ranked. However, besides that, it's not that excellent, so shall we say, in terms of the rigor, in terms of the rankings. So as a researchers, I think for us this is important. And anybody in the audience who wants to publish about live design, maybe this will help you to also think about how you position your papers. Now I'm going to keep going. Again, any questions at the end, feel free to shoot them my way. Some of the main disciplines and research areas for live design. Well, the studies on live design essentially kind of fell to 9 main research disciplines that emerged from my data. Primary one was, not surprisingly, career guidance and counseling. So most live design papers, they came from career counseling and they've been published in related journals. But secondly, we have a runner-up of education studies, education management, education development. That was the second most prominent field. Psychology was also one of those big ones. and then other strands of psychology, particularly vocational career psychology, developmental psychology, but also other more niche fields that kind of came up, which was quite interesting. Journals that publish about sustainability and sustainable development. Somehow, several papers made it to those journals. Those were based in Switzerland, by the way. And they have a subchapters that speak about sustainable career development. So this journal, for example, focused on how to assure or promote more sustainability in career development. There was also literature on sports coaching, so work with elite athletes that life design has been utilized for, and also professional training and development, amongst others. Okay, so now moving to the research methods. The fourth finding regards the changing nature of research methods used over time. What has been interesting is that the qualitative studies largely dominated the research. Out of those empirical 86 papers, more than a half, nearly a half is qualitative papers, typically consisting of case studies and interviews. Mixed methods have been increasingly embraced in the last years also. And the quantitative studies, mostly based on quasi-experimental designs, some on experimental designs, have also been gaining traction, but remain in minority. Overall, there's been a changing and evolving trend over those years with how researchers choose to study life design. And again, it's in line with the calls of the early founding fathers, so to speak, of life design, like Savickas, who really called from the beginning in his first papers for more quantitative measures that we need to bring to life design, because the qualitative designs have their value, of course, but are limited in establishing the actual efficacy of this intervention. So I believe many researchers have been listening to his calls and other researchers, and we observe that in the data. These designs are becoming more common. However, there's still a profound lack of rigor in these experimental and quantitative designs, particularly implementing control groups. So, for example, out of all the eligible quantitative studies, really only around 1/3 employed either a control or a comparison group of some kind. So that presents a challenge, of course, for us as researchers or practitioners, because the current evidence, or at least there are some control groups, but not many. And that means we cannot really infer whether it's really life design interventions that lead to those outcomes, which I think would be very important to do for us in the future. And we'll talk about it later. So need for more control groups and eliminating the confounding variables. Now about the settings. So another interesting finding from my first paper is that most of the interventions were conducted in an individual one-on-one setting, again, from career counseling. Many of these were, again, qualitative, so very sort of not necessarily supporting, helping us understand the efficacy of this intervention. However, in the recent years, there's a more group-based settings that have opened up, many researchers venturing into these and using quantitative designs. And so in these group-based settings, there has been more application of quantitative or mixed methods designs. Okay. Now about the format. So the format of these CLD interventions essentially has been typically facilitated in person in a traditional classroom model. But again, in recent years, there's been increase in virtual, online, digital models, and even hybrids, combining both. This has been more observed around the time of the COVID period, 2021, 2022, and after. However, majority is still in-person kind of format. That is presential format. Majority of the studies, 79 studies out of 86. And these numbers are not adding up. I need to update this. So it should be 86. The earliest use of online interventions was about already in 2016 by Nota, Santilli, and Soresi, the Italian research group that have kind of pioneered this in the literature. And maybe interesting for discussion of a software that employed live design in a fully computerized way. This was a study in Hong Kong, conducted with large sample of students. So these are just some highlights from the delivery. About the sampling, so average sample sizes, just noted here. I guess what is interesting in these findings is to pick out the most relevant things here. Is probably that there's been a range of groups that live design has been employed in these peer-reviewed studies, ranging from primary school children, high schoolers, young adults in university settings, excuse me, but also older adults, typically up until the age of 50 years old max. So there's been a tendency to bring live design to various groups and various specific populations. And these included also vulnerable groups and ethnic minorities, several studies with these demographics, people with disabilities, sports athletes again, and even coaches of those athletes, unemployed and those seeking employment, few number of those studies, school teachers, career counselors themselves, where live design has been employed in one study, medical doctors, and so on, entrepreneurs. However, overall, if we would look at that in the findings, typically the studies have been largely applied to youth, to young population, young adults, typically in a secondary or university settings. Now, in terms of the ages of these populations, the mean age was 22 years old. These studies typically focused on immediate outcomes. That is, they measured, typically pre and post designs, and measured the supposed effects of live design right after the interventions were delivered. So very small number of studies in this case, only 8 studies out of those 86 actually employed some form of longitudinal measures with various degrees of follow-ups. Now, the most common type of period for follow-up, by the way, was 3 months. So this tells us a bit about the type of samples and the scope of live design studies. The key outcomes here, again, I'm aware there's a lot of text and I just don't want to overwhelm you, but I'm just going to extract the key things here. So what we did is we decided to kind of categorize this into 3 areas, trying to understand how does live design work, what outcomes it produces in 3 areas in relation to psychological resources, number 1, number 2, in terms of career resources, number 2, and number 3, concrete career outcomes. So psychological resources, we will be talking about self-efficacy, resilience, well-being, all these variables we have discussed in the previous calls in this group that some of you have been focusing on. Career resources, they are more, so again, more inner resources related to career performance or career outcomes. So here we talk about, career decision-making or career self-efficacy and so on. And the concrete career outcomes, finally, they are actually tangible results that people would take away or would experience as a result of live design. So for example, actually finding a job after live design intervention, or increasing, having a increased salary perhaps, or being promoted. Those could be perhaps considered as more concrete career outcomes. So we split these benefits in these three categories for simplicity, and then essentially assessed from all these studies what they reported, what were the findings. And so most of these studies, except one, all of them found some kind of empirical evidence for live design to be positively contributing or promoting psychological, career, and or both type of outcomes. In particular, some of the constructs that were most common are mentioned here. Those were often repeated across the studies. Things like increased reflexivity, self-awareness, self-esteem were very common. Now, on the career resources front, we are talking about different types of outcomes. Professional transitions management, career readiness, career life orientation, various constructs that have been discussed in the career literature that life design seems to be promoting. Again, I will leave the floor open at the end. We can dive deeper into this if you have any questions about these constructs, because I know some of them are quite maybe less known or not making immediate sense. But I guess what I want to highlight here is that one of the interesting findings here out of all these studies in all these 14 years up until now, 2023, is that we actually have no real evidence, not a single study that has been published to provide us with a data showing that life design interventions could be directly associated or lead to any kind of concrete career outcome. So although there is some evidence building up for the psychological career resources and psychological capital and some inner benefits, some interpersonal benefits to be derived from this, and when it comes to actual real life results, we don't know yet. That's a very important, I think, finding from this. So I'm going to keep going. Now, another interesting finding that came from the data, looking at the studies and from where they were published and where they were conducted, was the cultural context and the regional aspect of these studies. It's very clear that life design is a topic of interest across the world. It's not only in Europe, but it's also in other parts of the world. And when we actually did the numbers, most of the studies, maybe might surprise some of you, came out from the African continent, particularly from South Africa. South Africa seems to be really leading the front on life design papers because some of its authors being very, very prolific, some of them publishing single case studies, mostly qualitative work. So that's, of course, skewing the numbers a little bit. But overall, there seems to be clearly some countries that are more interested in life design research-wise than others. And that's, again, something I want to discuss and explore in my discussion. And maybe I would welcome your feedback on that at the end. Why do you think that's the case? Why is South Africa so strong? Why Italy, out of all the European countries, is so interested in career construction and life designing? So these are just some ideas. Here, overall, again, I just draw the maybe arbitrary division between the global South, if you will let me use this type of terminology, seems to be leading the way, or kind of on an equal power with Western countries. Maybe there's a greater need for people to navigate their careers there also for different reasons. Again, I'm just still trying to process and understand this right now at this stage. And any feedback is welcome. So perhaps one of the final things, last but not least, perhaps most importantly, the actually effect sizes. Again, I'm still zooming in on this one, and I'm reviewing this more closely. There's still some question marks, but so far, from my current understanding, out of all these studies that were eligible for effect sizes to be computed, we are talking about quantitative studies and some of the mixed studies, most of the mixed studies, essentially, most of them reported the effect sizes, which made it easier. Some of them didn't report them, so we had to calculate them. Overall, it seems that the life design has yielded effects that were between typically low to moderate. That was 5 studies. 9 studies were showing moderate to large effects, and 9 studies met the criteria for demonstrating larger effects for the outcomes they measure. So based on that understanding right now, it does seem and appear that life design is shown to be it can be an effective intervention with regards to different outcomes, and particularly in the career domain, with career adaptability as being the most studied construct, so to speak. Career decision making or career self-efficacy, life design has been shown to be pretty effective in promoting these type of career resources from the available data. So what's the summary? Summary is that life design is a relatively young field, as we said, 14-year-old baby, it's still growing. It's largely dominated by qualitative studies. Sounds like a strong word, dominated, but it's kind of, okay, they are more prevalent. There's been a growing call for a more quantitative, more experimental, more rigorous research to be brought into this field in recent years. We know very little about life design still because of the lack of longitudinal outcomes, which maybe explains the lack of concrete outcomes, because most studies don't really follow up with people later and actually check whether those people benefited from this intervention beyond the immediate, emotional or affective benefits that they may have derived. So that's another promising and necessary area for future. And various samples and settings that still remain unexplored and understudied. Perhaps even groups that would need it the most. We are talking about unemployed adults, people in transition, in the older ages, the use of online group formats that could be more scalable, and so on. All of these are future avenues for life design research from our data. So overall, I think the key lesson here is that we need more rigorous, more experimental, and more longitudinal designs that could be using also scalable formats and ideally also controls, so we can exclude any confounding and any other variables. So based on this understanding from my first research paper, essentially the intention was to pave the way and also understand where the needs are, where the gaps are, and now moving into this direction for my subsequent 2 papers, which will comprise my thesis for my PhD defense here at Nova. And so I guess what I also wanted to share with you is that we have applied for a big project, for a big grant with a bank, a Spanish bank that supports the development of the Pyrenean Peninsula, both for Spain and Portugal. And together with my research team, with our project lead, Samantha, Professor Samantha Sim, and my colleague Amelia, we have been successful in actually receiving the grant. We've been one of the winners of this year of this research grant with our life design project. So we now have some more base to build on and are able to move into this direction to really bring more rigor to this field of life design and put it more to the test, which seems to be what's needed based on my first paper. And so just very briefly at the end, I'm just to give you a sense of what we are cooking and what sort of I'm planning for my subsequent 2 papers here. Essentially, this is still in work in progress, of course, more planning stage. But what we want to do is essentially conduct experimental studies with life design. Firstly, with our students at Nova. So working with our business school students here in a group-based way. So we are talking about more group-based life design intervention. And then positioning these papers towards relevant journals. Again, any feedback will be welcome from your experience. And then for the 3rd paper, we have partnered with an NGO organization based in Portugal that supports unemployed adults, people in the older ages, typically over the 50s, 60s, who are on the other side of the transition. So young people transitioning to the job market, that's a one vulnerable group, you could say, that could benefit from life design based on the studies we have seen. But a second group, which is heavily understudied and could benefit from this intervention, are the people at the other side of already being out of the job market, or perhaps retiring, even transitioning into the next stage of their lives, and needing some kind of a guidance and support. So that's the kind of a 3rd study that I would like to conduct here. And that's it for my presentation, for me talking. Thank you, and I welcome any questions. And again, thank you for your time.
So thank you very much, Radek, and congratulations, for the project you won with the kind of Big Bang, you said, and also thank you for your insights in the study literature review. So I think that there are already kind of questions going on in the chat, only a few, but I think it's more kind of welcome that you also, yeah, you can see already clapping hands. That's really great. Thank you for that. And yeah, it's open for questions. Please go ahead, all of you.
So I would like to start. So the first is, yes, we also recognize there is no quantitative or evidence-based results on the impact of life design in general, not just particularly in the context of Korea. And because you have already an overview, it would be great to have a proposal what kind of items could be measured. I think also we might not reinvent the wheel. There are items in positive psychology, resilience research, in entrepreneurship research, where we might able to recycle. And two of our people, Barbara and Angela, they generated something. Maybe it would be interesting for you to propose something and introduce it as what do you think about that? And Karina and myself, we had an idea. As you may know, many of us are part of the life design track at Euram, which will take place next year in June in Bath. And so in case you are proposing something, deadline for the submission is in January. And we could invite the authors and use the meeting for discussing. What do you think about that? We would like to address that. Would you like to be a part of it? Then I'm pretty sure within our ecosystem, you will find people who said, yeah, I will join the kind of a database, and that you have a larger sample group size. But these are some thoughts from my side.
Yes, just a very brief reaction before passing the word. Thank you so much, Bettina, and just want to express my intention to definitely would love to, and I'm aiming to go to Yeram as well, and would love to propose a paper. So I am considering this paper, my first paper, the systematic review, being perhaps the paper that could have a place in this life design track there, because it could also support other researchers to, find the gaps that they could explore, and like this we could push the field a bit further than it is right now. So definitely yes.
Great. So thank you. Any more comments, questions? Yeah, Kate.
Yeah, I can also. Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Barbara.
Barbara, go Barbara.
Yeah, thank you, Radek. It's the study I was waiting for since months, or years. Yeah, I was also starting to looking into the literature, not that systematically, but I saw that there is not too much. But and it's really amazing to see that you were looking into that and what you found and to work from that. I hope that you can publish it soon, or that we meet in Bath to work more on it. What I saw when I was looking into the literature, I saw Savika's approach, what is not exactly the same approach as we have from the Stanford approach with the life design approach. Did you look at these differences? Can you say something about that? How many papers are about this Savika's approach versus the design thinking approach?
Yes, so first of all, I must give huge credit and express public thanks to my advisor, Samantha, who really guided me in this direction, to actually start with literature review first before I do anything else. Because like this, we can have a map of what's out there, like a territory, mapping out the territory, and then we can all hopefully make better decisions where we want to go. So definitely, I'm aware of this distinction, and I'm also in discussion with Dr. Sebastian Kernbach from St. Gallen, which some of you I think know. He mentioned that he's a friend of yours, and with him we've been having conversations about this. There are different schools of life design within life design. have emerged. And Savickas is one of the early fathers of life design in more counseling based. And then we have Stanford guys who kind of came with the design thinking, more collaborative, more applied, slightly different. And then perhaps other researchers like Jerome Rossier and other guys, Hartung, and maybe they have their own takes. So I am aware of this, and actually it's been one of my latest feedback also from my advisor, Samantha, to really crystallize this. So I'm working on it right now. And in my discussion section, I would love to at least dedicate part of it, to discuss how life design has evolved and how there are these different schools of life design. So maybe I'll have to also specify, based on your suggestion, how many studies were, Savickas kind of style, and how many studies were more based on the more collaborative design thinking model, and so on. So I think it's a good feedback.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Kate. Kate?
Hi, Radek. Thank you so much. Really interesting. And like Barbara, I can't wait to read. Can you hear me? Can you hear me at all? Yeah. I can't wait to read your paper because I think a systematic review is long. Professional capacity as a career consultant within a university. And so my master's comes from the career theorists and the career silo, rather than the management or the entrepreneurship silo. And I just think it's really interesting. If you just substitute the word kind of career research for life design, a lot of these things are looked at within that field. However, having said that, life design is so much more attractive and open and encompasses all those other things from positive psychology. So I think this whole definition is one that I really struggle with. And I'm really pleased that Barbara mentioned this distinction between Savickas, or you did that, Savickas, because his career adaptabilities is very much from the career counseling side, but it's very different to the design thinking, design your life, Stanford. And I've done that. I've been to Stanford and worked with those guys. I think there is a really, and then at last year's URAM, we had this sort of work from Karina pulling in positive psychology. So I think it's a really, really exciting area, but we kind of, definitions, terminology, I think is one of our real challenges. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but I do think it's a fascinating area because it intersects across so many different disciplines. So I think maybe that's why we need to do the work.
Great. Stefan, Bettina. I think Stefan first.
Yes. So, Radek, thank you very much for your presentation. Such a great idea to do a literature review on life design. Perfect. I wish I could have the paper today and read through it. And I completely agree with Kate with the focus on career and life design. I don't know why you focused on career, but that definitely makes a focus. And I was wondering about which search strings did you use, because this finally determines the results. And I'm wondering a bit if it covers all the other fields like, I don't know, design thinking or an entrepreneurial focus and so on. Could you tell a bit more about your search strings and the inclusion and exclusion criteria?
Yes, that's a great question. My search string was really focused on two words: career design and life design specifically. That was my main research. So I didn't include any other like entrepreneurial, any other keywords, because from the literature I came from, which was originally Savickas career literature, that was not the kind of a language used there. So that's first answer. Now the exclusion criteria, let me just give a moment.
But just one question so it's just the two keywords, and you did a title abstract analysis and then identified the journals. There are no synonyms used for design or for life or career. That's the focus, right? Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes. That's correct. And so the inclusion criteria, so we looked at the two databases again, Scopus and Web of Science, using these strings. We have looked at the only articles. There was a second one that have been peer reviewed. So they have gone through peer review process and were published in academic journals, narrowed down to the relevant subject and research area. So, you know, the databases, we pretty much included all the ones that were kind of relevant. Pretty much I could be more detailed, but just skipping to my abstract now, you know, management, business, psychological literature, education literature, essentially anything that wasn't like, you know, engineering or anything like that, we kind of included. And yes, written in English, and eventually consisted of exclusively of empirical based studies that employed qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods designs. Those were the kind of a
all right, but you included them from all different thematic fields. There are no thematic fields which you excluded for whatever reason. Okay, good. No. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you again for this informative introduction. And because Christmas is coming, I continue my wishes. So besides the quantitative proposal, which would be so valuable, I heard you're still writing, and I particularly like, so I'm lazy in reading and slow. And what really helps me to grasp data much faster when there are tables. What could be tables where you're comparing different approaches, or where they are coming from? What kind of elements are they using? Because what my impression is, there are so many, it's like, what is design thinking? An answer of one of my former teammates was Post-its. So, and it's my hypothesis that there is also a very broad range what career life design is or not. And therefore, to have an overview of the what are the definitions, what are elements that are applied or has been investigated, that would be so valuable. Because sometimes what we also recognize, we're talking about entrepreneurial life design, but what the heck is it and what is it not? And I think to be brave and to represent your perspective on that based on your literature review and maybe get in some scientific arguments, I'm looking forward for it.
Thank you. That's very
Visualizations, helpful. Karina is right. Mapping.
I guess one question I also had for the group is for me to understand from the beginning. Again, I was deep in the literature, reading, you know, live design papers by Savickas and others. I haven't come across the entrepreneurial live design combination of words. So I've been interested from the beginning. What motivated you to frame or center the group's meetings mostly around this type of
oh, that's very easy to answer. The pure aspect that two people who started the conversation on live design are teaching entrepreneurship. And now then Barbara came in, and Sebastian was part, but he didn't join the conversation. So Steve Gideon and myself, we start talking about the topic 3 years ago. Barbara joined, and Barbara is now in impact entrepreneurship. It is the context we are working in and for.
Yeah, which brings me also to my thinking when you said, Bettina, yeah, which kind of items have you measured? And I was also thinking about, okay, and what is the target group? Because it's really important to know whether it's children, disabled people, some people who are unemployed, or young students who want to maybe, you know, kind of are in the beginning of their career. And this might also be, and there also the entrepreneurship comes also into, yeah, whether it plays a bigger or a less role. And so, yeah.
So, Stefan?
So I think we can make a lot of, or you can make a lot of papers just from what you have now, or presentations perhaps for conferences with different focus. Yeah, like one is target group focus, one can be which variables have been looked at in this context. One can also be about definitions. Today we had a call with Stefan. In his dissertation, he made like a mapping, yeah, of mind maps, yeah. So we could take these definitions of each as a mind map, and then see like which keywords or which causes and effects and which perspectives are in each definition, and are they very much overlapping or different. So each of these questions can be yeah, presentations for conferences, for example.
You see, Barbara is always our creative mindset who can already make out of it a lot of things. Stefan, you raise your hand.
Yeah, one note, I posted another journal in the chat, the International Journal of Management Reviews, which might be a channel for your review if it got a relation to management and organizational research. I don't know, but check. It's a good but really tough journal. The second thing is when you're planning your next studies, you said that you would like to do longitudinal studies with the integration of some control variables, however that might look like. I've got no imagination about how this can be done. I mean, do you already got an idea how this can be measured in the long run? Because in the long run, you have so many factors that impact future outcomes. I think it's impossible to control it. So what's your idea?
It's a very good and very tough question, and that's why I have you know, I'm really in conversation with my mentor, which is Professor Samantha Sim. I don't know if Samantha is still here.
She's
I'm still here. But if I may, very quickly. So it's not that we are measuring control variables, but we are doing experiments with control conditions. And I think earlier someone also had a question for Radek, like, what do you mean by quantitative methods? And that's a very good question. So it's not just that we're measuring like with scales, quantitative outcomes, what happens over time, as opposed to just interviewing people or observing them. What we're doing is also to have this randomized control trial, which I think Radek also pointed out earlier in his in the presentation, that there is actually a huge, and that's how we gather kind of gold standard evidence for whether something works or not. So I dabble more in the mindfulness interventions field, and from there it has kind of grown to like people are doing these randomized control trials, meaning there's an experimental group and then there is a control group. And then we kind of see, well, okay, does it actually work or not? So that's the idea that we have with quantitative methodology, experimental methodology, to kind of add more rigor. And hopefully we find good evidence for career life design. And that's the idea.
Is this something you would like to do, for example, with students, that you have one group with get the intervention, the other doesn't, and then 3 or 4 years later on you research them again? Is that the way you're focusing on?
Yeah, so that would be the way, but I think our time frame, given the limits of our grant, it's only about a year, so not 3 years. Of course, I think that's also something that Radek uncovered when he was looking at the career, kind of some of the careers literature, that there isn't a longitudinal follow-up. Like we don't really know over the course of 20 years, like what happened to people's careers. So this is just a small drop in the bucket. Like we'll just want to know up to a year, did something change? But of course, I see the value in the comment. Like it would be really great if we could follow people over a longer time span. But given the scope of the project, that's the idea.
That's difficult, even more for a dissertation.
Yes.
I need to leave, unfortunately. Thank you so much, and all the best, Radek. See you soon. Bye-bye.
See you, Stefan. And Bettina and Barbara, you also had a question.
Not a question, a comment.
Or
So
comment.
Barbara and myself, we had one entrepreneurial or life design seminar in Switzerland in the context of master in business innovation. And what was interesting to us or to me that most of the students really addressed career topics. Just one person want to get to know a partner who is accepting his career work attitude. But what was so interesting to me is also that designing a career, it's just a part of life design. So I think that life should be a part of the whole notion, that should not be underestimated. And what we also recognized is Barbara has, I hope you heard her introduction in live looping. And what I particularly love at Barbara's approach, in comparison to what I have seen and heard from Stanford, is that Barbara puts a lot of effort supporting the participants to understand themselves as a part. Okay, when you have such a expanded understanding of yourself, what is actually your problem? And then you go in this understanding. And I think this is, first, it's very different to how others are approaching life design. And I think it's also so relevant when it comes to designing something, that you have a deep understanding of the context, not of the problem career you're addressing, about yourself. That is the fundament of everything.
Which is kind of similar to design thinking. And it
No,
was
it's unfortunately not.
Yeah, it is if you think on the customer. I mean, you also try to understand the
No, it's not. You try to understand, and that's unfortunately not true, Ute.
Okay.
If you're applying design thinking in, for example, in the healthcare context, you're always applying design thinking in the context of a project topic. You do not have a starting point. If you apply it in a sense, a design thinking at Siemens Healthineers, you would have to start a project. Who are we as Healthineers? What is our self-understanding? That would be a comparison. Because you start directly in the problem space, because everyone expects that the people involved in this project, they know that already. Because the core is really the problem and the solution space. This is like design thinking. You're right.
I mean, that's what I had in mind, maybe, yeah. So theoretically, yeah, we should always look in the problem space first from design thinking approach, which means also to understand the customer, the ones who will use any kind of, who has a problem, to understand that, and then go in the problem space first, which is not done in industry and maybe also in some companies we know. Nevertheless, so Steve also goes in this direction, doesn't he? He also, with Gideon, yeah, with his approach, tries to really look into
it's life support for the students. Steve purposely addressed that many students have burnout and they should apply design your life or entrepreneurial life design to better navigate through their studies.
Yeah. Barbara and Kate.
Final questions.
Two final questions. Barbara and Kate. Barbara, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what we previously talked about longitudinal studies. I had a call some weeks ago with Dave Evans, and he told me about where he had some interventions in an incubator or something, and then they stopped it because they didn't really see that it has an effect. So they were not really measuring, but I mean, you get the feedback, and you so they thought that's not really effective. But then 4 years later. So that time frame we're talking about when it goes about career decisions or starting a business. 4 years later, they saw effects. Yeah, they saw that people out of this program really started companies, and in talking with them, they found out that it started in this intervention 4 years ago, the thinking and the preparing, and then finally making a decision to quit a job and start a new business, or to change something in life. So it really has longitudinal. Really means years. Yeah. In career changes and in starting businesses and entrepreneurship.
And Kate is already shaking her head. You're on mute, Kate.
I'm unmuted. I think so many ideas. I think maybe some of in the literature within the counselling space, might give us this idea of overlap with user experience and where we start from, because that whole kind of counselling literature is around starting alongside in a place of empathy. I think it's really interesting. I do think design thinking maps really well onto career management and the early part of the thinking about who am I, but there's lots in career literature around that as well. So that there may be something there. And you know, the counselling, career coaching literature space, it eternally tries to solve this measurement thing. You know, how do we intuitively as practitioners, we know that the change doesn't happen in the room when we're doing a one-to-one or a workshop. We know that we intuitively feel, and quotes, know that it happens in those spaces afterwards, between sessions or many years afterwards. So I have no idea how we measure that. I'd love to, somebody turns up with that, they'll win the gold prize. It's a really interesting thing. One very last thought, and I have no idea where this takes us, but in the field of nutrition research, I work at King's College London, and we've got a lot of people who have been doing kind of nutrition and lifestyle research based on 8 students, 12 students. What they've done is now completely changed, and they've gone into mass. Somehow they've translated into mass populations, and they're drawing conclusions from massive epidemiological studies. Is there a way where they've got thousands of people that they're looking at? Is there a way we can use that sort of insight into this area? I don't know how we do it, but that's my thought for the end of the day.
But famous last word, and I can already see your excitement. Yeah, so I think we would love to talk with you, Radek, and really share our thoughts. I mean, everyone can feel free to, you know, contact Radek also afterwards and go into depth if you want to and if you like to. Thank you very much today, yeah, for sharing your insights. We are also curious on your paper. You can see already, and whatever you would like to share with us, please feel free to share. Usually we also share the presentations also. If you also want to share that, yeah, then you can send it to Bettina. And whatever is there and you would like to share or get more feedback, yeah, please go ahead and contact this group, and you will see what we can do, and yeah, where we can connect.
Thank you so much for your time, and happy to keep in touch and see you at Yoram, I hope, in Bath.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And maybe also see you next week. Yeah. Okay, Bettina?
No, thank you, Ute, for hosting today and arranging that Radek is giving a talk today.
Yeah, welcome. And yeah, and also, Bettina, we have to say, yeah, next week? Next speaker?
Barbara, would you like to introduce it? Because you kindly arranged it.
Yeah, next week, it's a colleague of mine, Gisa Todd, from the LMU Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center. She's focusing in her research on resilience and has a framework on resilience. So how can we strengthen our resources for resilience? That it's also very important in life design, or it's very, very much overlap with life design. And it's also very important, especially for entrepreneurs who have all these learning cycles and setbacks. And how can we, with more strength, go through that? That's next week with Gisa Todd.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.